right, thank you so much, Ed. Well, one Pennsylvania school district safety plan in case of a shooting isn't to arm staff with guns, but with rocks.
Every classroom has been equipped with a 5-gallon bucket full of Riverstone. If an armed intruder attempts to gain entrance to any of our classrooms, they will face a classroom full of students armed with rocks, and they will be stoned.
Yes, this is a real story. So is this really the way to keep students safe from potential gunmen? Here to debate, Senior Communications Advisor with the Heritage Foundation, Genevieve Wood, and former candidate for DNC chair and Fox News contributor, Jamu Green. Good morning, ladies. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Abby.
All right, so all this time, Genevieve, we just needed rocks.
Well, you know, I was actually at the march yesterday, Abby, and there was a lot of law enforcement there, a lot of military there, and I don't think they had rocks in hand. They had guns in hand because they knew if a gunman showed up, that's what they were going to need to protect everybody there around them. Look, this is a debate where I think everybody involved wants our schools to be safer. And if putting a bucket of rocks in a classroom is a secondary measure, that's fine. But I think the idea that those kids are going to be on the same level playing field if a gunman walks in, I just don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, Jamu, we can laugh a little bit about rocks and using these stones as a last resort in these cases when you have a shooter come into a school. But I think Genevieve brings up a good point. It's a bigger conversation about what we collectively do as Americans to keep students safe. We've seen far too many shootings happening and far too many lives being taken.
You're absolutely right. First, I thought that this was a story in The Onion. It blew my mind that this was serious, but it absolutely is a much bigger conversation, to the point of the largest march in our history took place yesterday. I'm glad to hear that Genevieve was there. Glad to see Republicans, conservatives finally understanding that they are going to have to stand up to the NRA when we have in a country one product, only one product that cannot be recalled, and that is guns. And that is as a result, as a Democrat, I will say this happened 40 years ago when a Democrat, Representative John Dingell, blocked the Consumer Product Safety Commission from being able to recall guns. There is a lot of work we need to do. Universal background checks are certainly that. Being out there yesterday in the streets, 800,000 people, it is very clear that time is up on these NRA politicians.
When you say guns, I think it's important to clarify what you mean by taking guns away, because the Second Amendment is something that this country was built on. People are very passionate about what that means to them. I come from Utah, the Wild West, where many of my family members own guns. It's important to them. They're hunters. So how do we have this conversation? Maybe I turn that over to you, Genevieve, of how we have an honest conversation about the importance of the Second Amendment and not taking those rights away, but being realistic about the realities that we live in today.
Well, I think we have to be realistic about banning guns. I mean, as I said, I was at the march yesterday, and that was the answer basically on every poster, every sign, everyone you talked to. Most of what they talked about, well, no, they wanted more gun control. They wanted more background checks, some of the things that you've mentioned. And listen, we can revisit all that, but we have to realize we've already got a lot of those laws on the books. And the truth is, in many cases, not just in the public shootings we've seen in schools, but for example, last year, the church in Texas, that guy should have been picked up on a background check, but he wasn't. Sometimes those laws don't work. And the idea that we're going to have gun-free zones and we're not going to protect our kids, I think is a bad one. Look, there's a lot of facts here we have to talk about. I think one thing, Abby, that's really important for people to know, we've talked about mental illness. As many as 1 in 5 children in our public schools have said they have some, or we know have some form of mental issues, but up to 80% of them don't get help. They don't get therapy. They don't get medication. Those are the kind of things we need to talk about, because in almost all of these shootings, schools and otherwise, we know mental illness or mental issues and depression are somehow involved. So this is a much bigger conversation than just guns.
We also have to look at universal background checks, and Republicans, quite frankly, Abby, I said nothing about banning guns. I'm from Texas, and I understand that guns are a part of the fabric fabric of so many American communities. But we also need to understand that the current laws are not good enough to stop the epidemic of gun violence.
But Jamie,
and I think we
have to be honest.
To stop being bought and paid for by the NRA. We've seen
right,
that.
Genevieve, quickly, last
NRA
week.
Republicans voted for a gun bill that for the first time they're standing up to it. And guess what? It's because the kids
all right, Genevieve,
are going to save us all.
Yeah, I just want to say you got to have laws that have got to be enforced, and I would encourage people at Heritage. We put together a school safety initiative. If you go to heritage.org, you'll see the information there on that. Facts are so important, and you'll see them there.
Right, and
I hope it's not about river stones, though.
the conversation
And
is far bigger than guns. I think we
laws.
can all agree with that in this
That's right.
conversation. The debate will continue. It's an important one. Genevieve, Jimmy, thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks, Abby.
All right, coming up.